Hey church, Pastor Matt here coming to you from editing. The video that you are about to watch, or rather listen to, is a conversation between me and Alan Cai, one of our elders, as a part of our Big Questions series. And unfortunately, we lost the video for this midweek mashup, but it is still an excellent conversation that I recommend you listen to. We are going to break down the question, why do bad things happen to good people? But hey, I'll let us explain it here. Just feel free to pop in your headphones. No need to watch, but hope that you enjoy. Well, hello and welcome back. Today I'm sitting down with Alan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we're in the middle of this Big Questions series. And one of the big questions that we're asking is, why do bad things happen to good people? And you and I were having kind of a conversation and decided to sit down and have a conversation about it because it might be helpful to our folks online. So, what's kind of your perspective? What are you kind of seeing about this question that's particularly impactful?
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier, this question is probably like the most popular question. I shouldn't even say popular. It's popular among the people who are still kind of on this journey of discovering God.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, because it's like the big kahuna sitting at the very top. If you can't address that, a lot of the stuff kind of falls and starts pulling at the threads of that, right? Yeah. And at the same time, because it's such a common question, like you said, I also wanted to have this conversation very open and honest so that anyone who is part of the church, our congregation, or even anyone else who's watching it, if you're also on your own walk of faith with God, I want to be able to help equip you with ways to have the conversation. And it's always the most important thing is to have it in a way where it's loving and empathetic and understanding, the other person who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you talk about these difficult big questions, our emotions get caught up in it, and I want to really just take a step back and kind of break it down with you here.
Yeah.
So that, people can also think about it in their own minds and wrestle with it in a healthy way.
Right.
So that, there's a very layered nuance to something of this magnitude.
Yeah, I think that's good because I think, like you said, it's kind of like the first big question that a lot of people encounter.
Yeah.
Like as we are wrestling with questions of is there a God? Do we believe what the Bible says? How do I align religion with what my experience with life is?
Yes.
I think this idea that there are people who are good in the world and bad things happen to them.
Right.
It kind of impacts us on a couple of different levels, right? We were talking about intellectually, right? How do we align those things? Philosophically, what does that mean for morality? And then emotionally, if something bad happens to me or someone that I care about that seems undeserved, then how do I reconcile that when people are saying oh yeah, God is totally good,
Right,
and he's an all-loving, all-knowing God, and he sees you, but these bad things are still happening.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think in order to really kind of unpack this, what I've found through numerous conversations is that there is some pattern and consistency with how people think about this. And so today I think a way to really attack this question in sort of an organized, structured ways, I've broken it down into sort of three different categories, right? There is the first category is, how do you address this problem from more of a philosophical / apologetics kind of way, thinking about the philosophy of the question itself. And then I love what you said about, sometimes reading scripture and talking about God seems so far and distant from our daily life. How do I relate this to what I'm actually experiencing in my life? How do I rationalize this, right? Because it's one thing to be up in the clouds with heady knowledge and theology. It's another thing when you're dealing with it in your own life on a day-to-day basis, right? And I think last but not least, we'll talk about, you touched on this last week with Eric too, is that a lot of times when people ask this question or have this conversation, it's really coming from an emotional place. And as someone who's listening and trying to have a dialogue with this, we have to be very attuned to where the person is, where they are in their journey when they're asking this question.
Yeah.
If we only have one canned response for every single thing, I think we're missing the forest of the trees, because a large part about who we are is trying to have relationship and build loving communities. And you can't apply a hammer to every single construction job. You have to have an understanding of when something is appropriate. So we'll just dive right in. I think the first category, as I mentioned, from like a philosophical standpoint, right? The one thing that I really try to have a conversation with the person who's asking this, because usually it also comes from, and I've heard different variations of the question. You've posed it as just, bad things happen to good people. A lot of times it's framed as like, well, why does God allow suffering in the world? Evil and suffering. Right. And usually when they say that, I'm pretty sure they're talking about like the needless, unnecessary suffering. It's not like, well, somebody committed a crime and then they got punished for it. I mean, I think they can rationalize that, but it's like, hey, if I'm just trying to be a good person and, I get sick, disease,
even like big global things,
pandemics,
pandemics,
wars,
war, hunger, oppression, things like that.
Right. And so what's curious is that a lot of times what I like to do is to take a step back and define the terms, because a lot of times we have this urgency to just jump right into the question and start like debating, arguing, or arguing, I should say. But it's sometimes we got to take a step back and actually like make sure that we're on the same wavelength when we're framing the question, right? So to me, like when I wrestled with this, it dawned on me that, before we can even answer the question, we have to define and understand what that person means when they say good and evil. Because to me, if we were to assume that there is no God, and that, if there is no God, there is no intelligent design, there is no ultimate creator, then we're left with the notion that you and I sitting here, it's just a byproduct of billions of years of cosmic chance, of matters and molecules colliding,
happenstance and chaos,
that something came from chaos, and then now we're here and we're intelligent beings who are questioning the purpose of our existence, right? If that is the case, then to me, unfortunately, you're stuck with this premise that there is no such thing as good and evil, because we're just chemical soup, and morality becomes relative. Now, you and I both know that that's going to be a slippery slope, because if morality is subjective, then something good to somebody can be very bad for somebody else, and vice versa. If your good is keeping your family alive, and that means taking the food from me, it's good for you, but it may not be that great for me, right? So then it begs the question, it's like, well, who gets to decide what's good for what group of people at what point in time, in which location? Right? And so I think it's a very slippery slope to me if you say that, well, morality is simply subjective. And I think we can pretty much say with certainty that in our lives, based on our own experience, we can pretty much confidently say that that's kind of not how the world works, right? It doesn't matter where you were raised or what your upbringing was or what language you speak or your ethnicity or gender or anything. If I say, hey, the harming and the murdering of an innocent child, right or wrong, I think it's pretty safe to say that 99% of people would be like, yeah, that's a definite no. Period. End of story. There really is no way you can wiggle your way out of a moral conscience of saying, well, in this situation, the murdering of an innocent girl can be okay. Like, we all know and feel that, right? So our own lives suggest that morality can't be relative, because we all ascribe to this notion that there are just certain things that we feel injustice for, and that righteousness is a real thing. And so for me, I want to like define that term, because in my mind, if morality is not relative and it's objective, that means that there is a ultimate moral law that we ascribe to as human beings. And if there's an ultimate moral law, that would imply and suggest that there's a moral lawmaker, right? And so what helped me was, it's like, well, hold on a second. I realized that, before I was a Christian, I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm literally having to borrow from God's ethos of good and evil in order to fashion an argument just to argue against him. That itself is sort of like a logical fallacy, right?
Right.
And so I had to like take a step back. It's like, well, okay, if that philosophical approach doesn't really align with what I see and feel in real life, then maybe I'm missing something there, right? And so I before we even get down that road, I think from a philosophical and like apologetic standpoint, it's, well, how do we define that? Because if we say that's not how it is, then what would you propose the alternative be if it was all relative, right?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how does that land in your mind when you hear that? I know that's a bit more of a like a philosophical, abstract model, but it's worth thinking about, because unless we're defining it in the same terms, that's how we just end up going around in circles and not really making any progress in terms of the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like the way that you approach it, because it's not just like, oh, well, God said it and it's in the Bible, so we should believe it, right? It's taking a step back and almost working backwards from the problem and saying like, okay, I'm feeling something within me about this is right or this is wrong.
Right.
Where does that come from? Okay, well, maybe wisdom passed down through generations, parents teaching their children, but ultimately you trace it back far enough and it's like, we see that this is in people. Like even people who do not call themselves Christians, right? People who don't follow Jesus, they still have this sense of morality, and yet, so they're not getting it directly from the Bible or praying to God and asking for guidance, but it still has to come from somewhere. Yeah, and
it's almost like it's written in the blueprint of who we are, the essence of what it is to be human.
Yeah, and so if we can tie ourselves together as humanity by this common thread of there's this moral longing to understand what's right and what's wrong. Yeah. Where does that come from? Why does it unite us all? Then that points us towards some sort of intelligent design that's like, well, something is tying us all together. Who's the one who's tying it? Right. And we can approach it and say like, we just want to be good people. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a God. But that doesn't really address the fact that like these ideas come from somewhere. And even if they're coming from within us, how did it get there? Yeah. Right. And I think we can try to draw conclusions of like, well, whatever is objectively right is going to be what positively affects the majority of the people. But that will still leave people who are not in the majority who are negatively affected, right? Yeah, absolutely. So if we say like, we should take from group A to feed group B, right? That still negatively affects group A. Yeah, right. Yeah,
and we've done that in the past, but it doesn't mean that. And I think people can agree that that's not how we live our lives, right? We like, if you look at it from a very black and white situation, you can say, well, in the best interest of prolonging the human species, we should make these decisions so that the majority of the humans can survive, so that our species will thrive. Nobody thinks like that when we're talking about real life, right? And even if you said, these sickly people, we're going to just, let them go because that means more resources for us. Right. Even though logically it makes sense if that's all you're thinking about, but we don't live like that as a society.
Yeah, really what it comes down to is that each of these situations that we encounter that requires a decision on what's good and what's evil is up to discernment. Yes. Right? Because every situation is going to be different. And even when we tried to create our own laws and structures to kind of facilitate what is right and what is wrong, there's always exceptions. Yeah. And so it's an ever-growing problem because if we try to say this is what is objective, then there's going to be several exceptions to the rule that
Right.
then need to be addressed.
Right.
So what's more likely that we as a human collective can decide what is right and wrong and get it perfect,
Mm-hmm.
or that there is an arbiter that is outside
Mm-hmm.
of our understanding
Yes.
that has the, for lack of a better term, mental capacity
Mm-hmm.
to take into consideration every single situation
Mm-hmm.
that has happened and ever will happen.
That we haven't even been able to comprehend ourselves,
Yeah,
right?
and be able to say like, yeah, and I know in every situation what is right and what is wrong, and it takes a God level of discernment to be able to
Yes.
do that.
And I know that most people, although I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people may hear that and go, well, it makes sense, but it doesn't quite scratch the itch they're looking for,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's why in a transition to the next topic, we kind of have to go a bit deeper. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's more of the philosophical, your head's in the clouds, kind of the overarching view,
Yeah,
right? Let's define good and evil. Let's
Yeah.
understand what it is.
Mhm.
Where would we be if we didn't have moral
Right.
objectivity, right?
Yeah.
Can we really argue that we would be in a better state,
Mm-hmm.
or we would actually be in a worse state? So wrestle with that, think about that, challenge yourselves in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move to more of like a rational, real world example,
Yeah.
right? So I'm a parent of two.
Mm-hmm.
You're not new father anymore, but you're relatively new,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think like the easiest and the best example, and I'm always amazed because like a lot of this stuff was all theoretical and conceptual before I had kids, and when I had kids, like being a parent myself, a lot of this stuff suddenly it just clicked, it just made
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. It's hard to describe.
It's hard to
but
describe.
It really did. Like, once you are the person who is being the guide
Yes,
for someone who knows nothing, then
right.
then it's like, oh, every word that I say matters. It has a huge impact.
It has an impact, and like when you and Sandy decided to have kids, I think as with Eugenia and myself, and probably a lot of couples out there,
Mm-hmm.
usually, I believe that it's we were created in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we want to have kids, it's that outpouring of love, because the kids and life is a manifestation of the love that we've been received, right? That have been given from God. And so most people probably wouldn't think, well, there's so much suffering in the world, I'm better off probably not bring. I mean, people
Yeah.
may think that,
Yeah.
but for the most part, like you're not thinking about all of the evil and suffering and the pain that your kid might go through as a reason to not contemplate having kids.
Right.
Having kids is almost like an extension and a manifestation of the excess love that we've been given.
Right.
And so to me, when you see the relationship between a parent and a child, and I love what you just said, as a child, you bring your child into the world knowing full well that you cannot protect them from every single thing. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that I want to express and share my love through this child with the world,
Yeah.
and through my own family. And I'm prepared to be their parent, their guardian, their protector, in spite of the evil and suffering in the world.
Right. Right.
And I think, there's a very important distinction to make when people say, well, why does God allow things to happen? And I want to make a very clear distinction that sometimes, we may wrongfully paint a picture or imagine an assumption that may not entirely be true. I personally don't think God is the author of suffering or evil. He's not sitting up in the clouds with his arms folded going, yeah, that's right. You deserve that. And I'm going to just let you suffer in pain.
Yeah.
I think it's a wrong connotation that people have built up in their minds because they're trying to find a reason to justify what they're going through.
Right.
It's very easy for us humans to think in terms of, well, who's a scapegoat? Who's the person I'm going to blame for this, right? Where if you think about it from an analogy of a parent and a child, you may know full well that if Eden goes play at the park and she's running around, there's a pretty high chance that she's going to scrape her knee and cry.
Right.
You're not going to go out of your way to withhold parks from her forever for the rest of her life in fear of that.
Right.
Now, if she turns around and goes, well, what kind of a loving father are you? If you knowingly let me go to the park knowing full well that I might fall and scrape my knee. Why would you allow me to do that?
Yeah.
We don't think like that in terms of parents and childs, because to us it's very an easy distinction to make, right?
Right.
And at the same time, even if you had the power to snap your fingers and change that, would you as a parent? Like if you think about this, right? My daughter's 14 now, and Evan's 11. If I had the power, every single time they've ever made a mistake, I could snap my fingers and undo it. How would that benefit them, or what would that change in their lives, right? If my child pulls an all-nighter playing video games, doesn't study for the test, and flunks it, and if I had the power to snap my fingers and undo it, if she went out with her friends and, got in trouble because of the choices that she made, if I snapped my fingers and undid it, if for their entire lives I did everything I could to undo every single thing that ever caused them harm and pain, would we still be the same people that we are today? And I think we all know what the answer to that is. But it's easy to miss that when you're upset about something and you're looking for a sense of justice and you want to ascribe blame or fault to something. But I think in terms of the parent analogy, if we can think that way about our own child, what would a God of infinite wisdom and discernment have in store for us, right?
Yeah. I love my daughter so much.
Yeah.
And I would never wish for her to be in pain, right? But I know that it's inevitable that she is going to fall and scrape her knee at some point, right? She's going to get bumped. She's going to get bruises. She's going to cry. Like that's just how kids work, right? But once I've given her love and affection and she's calmed down and I can explain like, yeah, we have to be a little careful when we're climbing on the playground or when we have to look where we're going when we're running. Because she was in a phase for a little while where she loved running, but she wasn't looking where she was going. And so she would run straight into a wall.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, dude, you got to look where you're going. I can't keep doing this.
Right.
And so there's a learning to be had through that. I don't want my daughter to run into walls, right? That's objectively bad.
Right.
But I can teach her and prepare her and say, there's going to be a lot of walls, literal and metaphorical, in your life. And so you got to look where you're going, right? And so that's kind of like a very ground level sort of thing. But I think when we talk about God's role in our life, right? I think the parent analogy really clicks because it's so similar with how God is potentially involved in our lives. And there's a couple of common views on God's involvement with humanity. And it's God created the world and then he backed off.
Yeah.
And he has nothing to do now. He's just kind of letting it go.
Yeah.
There's the view that like, oh, God is kind of like the puppet master. He created the world and he controls every little thing.
He's signing off on all the suffering that's happening here, and he's signing off on the suffering that's happening there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And so every good and bad thing is because of God.
Right.
And then there's the view that's kind of somewhere in the middle of like God created everything and he is as involved as we allow him to be. Not that God doesn't want to be involved or he doesn't have the ability to be involved, but there's this sense of free will where we can go to God just like our kids can go to us when they have a question, when they need guidance, when they're frustrated, when they don't understand something. And God is present and ready to be as involved as we want him to be.
Right.
So, I mean, me as a toddler parent, I'm pretty heavily involved, right? But I'm guessing as kids get older, they tend to try to figure things out themselves.
Yeah.
And then will come and ask questions. I know for me with my parents, it wasn't until I was a young adult that I had the humility to be like, hey, maybe I don't know everything, and I have a lot of questions.
Right.
And so those are kind of the different views of God. And I think sometimes when we are wrestling with something like the problem of good and evil, why is there pain and suffering in the world? We like to take one of those all or nothing sort of views. And I see Christians in particular skew one of two ways. And either that's everything is controlled by God.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm suffering, then God has a purpose for it,
Mm-hmm.
which may or may not be true,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a rabbit trail that we'll leave on pause for now. But then also the opposite end of, well, every good thing that happens is from God,
Mm-hmm.
and every bad thing that happens is from the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a very extreme point of view because
Slippery slope for sure. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
it raises the devil to the same authority as God to
Yeah.
have his hand in every basket
Yeah,
all across the world all
sure.
at the same time. It's really giving him much more credit
Yeah.
than is due to him.
Right.
And also, it kind of takes away the free will of like, hey, if you do something very generous for your neighbor or something like that,
Right.
And you feel like, yeah, okay, I did a good thing, and someone comes in and was like, I actually know that good thing that you did, that's actually God.
Yeah.
And it might be God sending you a message to say like, hey, like putting it on your heart to go and help someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe God is involved in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But God is not literally pulling the money out of your bank account and putting it in
Yeah.
someone else's bank account.
Yeah.
You still have to be generous.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think when people think that, it's very limiting to God. I love what you said about not giving too much credit to Satan and the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also not detracting and shortchanging God. Like God doesn't need to do that,
Mm-hmm.
because the definition of sovereignty in God's providence is that He doesn't like what you do is not going to affect His plan.
Right. Right.
Right. And so He doesn't need to micromanage you.
Yeah.
He's more worried about your heart
Mhm.
and your soul.
Yeah.
And as a manifestation of that, you will make good choices if you're a follower of Jesus.
Mhm.
That whether you take this road or that fork or this turn,
Mhm.
it's all under His sovereignty. And
Yeah.
so whatever you mean it to be, it's going to be utilized towards His will anyways.
Mhm.
So I think like by saying, well, like to your point, picturing God as just a puppet master
Mhm.
puts Him in a box. It almost limits to what He's capable of doing. And we
Right.
don't need to do that
Yeah.
because He doesn't need us to fight that battle for Him. He already has it won
Yeah.
and fought, right?
Yeah. I think the way that we as Christians talk about God's role in our life and the
Mhm.
Holy Spirit in particular, what it sounds like to people outside of the church, it often comes across as like some sort of religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
That we have been coerced into believing, and now this mind control dictates everything that we do in our life.
Mhm.
When really what it should sound more like, if we're being accurate as Christians when we're talking about this to people outside of the church, it's more like God is a compass, right?
Mhm.
And God is going to point us in the direction of where we should go, because if this ever complex issue of what is good and what is evil, what is right, what is wrong, if we need discernment in every single situation, then it helps to have some sort of compass to navigate that.
Mhm.
And if we feel like God is pointing us in a certain direction, like a compass, then we still choose to follow that.
Yeah.
Right? We can still choose to ignore that, and then we're obviously not being very faithful to what we claim to believe.
Right.
But we still have the choice to follow it or not.
Yeah. And I think, you raised a good point, is that if you truly, if your goal is love can only be love if it's freely chosen and freely given.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a kid, you can't force your kid to love you by coercing them or putting a gun to their heads and saying, tell me you love me.
Right.
That wouldn't be true love.
Right.
Right? And so obviously, just like us with God, your child, they have the free will and choice to make decisions in their own lives.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to be trying to guide them because you think you have a plan of what might be best for them.
Mhm.
But ultimately, that free will, that free choice is what makes that love real.
Yeah.
And if God gave us free will and free choice, well, as a result, it's inevitable that wrong choices or difficult choices will be made that may lead to suffering, that may
Right.
lead to not so good things happening. But that is part and parcel of the world that we exist in.
Yeah.
And I think the one fallacy is that somewhere along the way, our society, whether it was through our teachings as a society or just, our culture, but somewhere along the way, people got this notion that they're somehow entitled to live a life free of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I never understood that because nobody ever told me that. That
Right.
wasn't part of my life disclaimer, right? And so it's almost like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, let me have my free will,
Mm-hmm.
and then turn around and question the manifestation of that free will and say, well, why is there so much suffering?
Right.
If God were able to snap his fingers and magically make all of this go away,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be free will anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have the argument of, well, are we just puppets, right?
Right.
And so he didn't want to create an army of mass robots to worship him. He wanted us to love him freely.
Yeah.
And as a result, this is the hand that we've been dealt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think first and foremost, God is not the author of evil or sin or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually no guarantee, or that there's no evidence that this isn't the perfect harmony and the maximum amount of goodness that there can be in the universe, right? We just assume that, well, if only there was less suffering, the world would be better.
Right.
But how do we know in our limited wisdom and discernment as just human beings that this wasn't exactly the exact recipe for what God needed to create to maximize the amount of souls being saved?
Yeah.
And so I think, that's one thing that we, again, challenge the listeners to wrestle with and think about that. Because it's easy just to ascribe blame to something and be like, well, why couldn't you have just made it better? But I think we also have to come to terms with, what the meaning of life is. Like life is, being able to go through trials and tribulations, grow from that. The essence of what it means to be human is to kind of overcome those obstacles, right?
Yeah.
What kind of humans would we be if we just, every prayer was answered and everything we ever wanted was always given to us? That's not how we would raise our own kids.
Yeah.
Then why should we expect that from, a divine father? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want my daughter to be prepared going out into the world. Right. And so I can do everything that I can to help her through that.
Short of living her life for her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But even then, like, I've lived my life and I mean, I'm barely managing that. Right.
Yeah.
So like, I can't live someone else's life for them too. Like,
Yeah.
I am a flawed person and a flawed parent and a flawed husband. Like, and yet my wife and my daughter stick with me through that. Right. And I'm doing my best to teach and to guide and to love. And it's very helpful to have that compass for me.
Yeah.
And so that's how I've pretty much always seen Christianity in my adulthood, is like God being that compass for us. Because even without going too deep into the minutia of the biblical stuff, even from the beginning of creation, even the way that God ordered the universe. If we believe as Christians that God created everything, God created it with an order, and within that order, there was still chance and chaos.
Yeah.
There was still a snake in the garden,
Yeah.
right? There was still Adam and Eve being able to have free will and make that choice, right? There was still these mythical creatures, chaos creatures, the behemoth and the leviathan, that to us seem like these huge, chaotic, cataclysmic monsters. And to God, it's like, oh, look, the small animal is splashing around and playing in the puddle, right? And so even they have their place in creation. And the creation account and these chaos creatures, it's all very poetic, but it speaks to what the world is today. Sometimes there's just chance, right? Sometimes bad things just happen because, unfortunately, that's how they happen, and we need to prepare our children to encounter that.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes bad things happen because humans have free will. and sometimes we are selfish, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're just doing what's best for us and not thinking about others, right?
Yeah.
If my family is hungry and you have food, right, then it's not too far of a leap to say, let me take that food so that I can feed my family. And in my mind, it's like, well, yeah, I'm trying to do what's good for my family, but obviously it's not good for yours,
Yeah.
right? And of course, sometimes people just do very bad things because they have the ability to, and they coerce and oppress others. And sometimes really bad things happen because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all of these different ways that bad things happen without God being involved,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And I think we would like God to be involved sometimes more than he is.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, then at what point does he become a puppet master and snaps his fingers and makes the bad things go away and invalidates free will?
Yes, exactly.
And that's a difficult thing to wrestle
Yeah.
with because of a lot of the pain and suffering
And
in
it's
the
not
world.
something that I'm trying to answer. I'm just like, we're just trying to say that, hey, that line probably does exist.
Yeah.
And it's up to God to discern what that line is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit about the philosophical aspect of it, the more of the grounded rationale.
Mm-hmm.
But, in my earlier Christian days, I was so gung-ho about the apologetic section of it and even the rational section.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized as I've gotten older is that a lot of times when people ask this question, they may not even realize it themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but they're actually seeking more of an emotional response.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem is that if I don't dig into that and reveal that,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it leaves the person who's asking the question always wanting more,
Mm-hmm.
because they're almost setting themselves up for failure, thinking they're asking a philosophical question when in reality they're needing an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
People who ask this question are oftentimes, let's say you're suffering from an illness,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you've lost someone close to you,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a sense of like injustice that you're trying to reclaim.
Yeah.
Right? There's a sense of righteousness, which
Yeah.
we all know, again, like we talked about, is written in our DNA because God is a righteous God, and if we're made in His image, there's a reason why we feel a sense of injustice when we see things that are unfair.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we ask this question, and if I just go gun-ho and blaze down the philosophical, apologetic, or rational path,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I may answer some of the things they talk about, but we're not really meeting their needs if we don't address the emotional part, which I think is the most important part of it.
Right. Yeah.
The one thing that drew me to Christianity when I was not a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and I was exposed to different religions, and I looked into them and I read them, and the one thing that kind of stood out was in a lot of other religions, their sense of paradise, heaven, or enlightenment is through your actions and your works.
Yeah.
Right? If you just work hard enough,
Mm-hmm.
or if you be good enough,
Mm-hmm.
through your action and through your works, it's sort of a survival of the fittest. If you can make the climb,
Right.
then you've earned your place,
Yeah.
right? And Christianity is the only religion where it's upside down. The fittest sacrifice himself for the survival of the weakest.
Right. Right.
And I think that stood out to be the most because, even when we say Emmanuel, God with us,
Mm-hmm.
I think we've sort of maybe missed a point here as I've sort of looked back at this myself. I was like, oh, the main character of the story or the question isn't the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what happens after the suffer occurs.
Yeah.
Is that, God specifically sent his son to experience all of that so that when it comes time for you to go through your trials and tribulations, which everybody will go through,
Yeah.
the focus shouldn't be on, how much this tribulation is affecting me. It's that, no, God already went ahead of you and did that.
Right.
And so he's with you.
Yeah.
And I think the quintessential thing there is, as we all go through this, and it's inevitable, what's really important is not whether or not it's going to happen, because we know it will. It's when it does happen, do you feel that you have faith and hope and that you're not alone?
Yeah.
And I think for us as Christians, I think, When I was more spiritually mature, I focused so much on the academic side of that question that I didn't realize that the people who are asking this, most of the time, what they really need is comfort and healing and love and hope and
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that we should really focus on is the other stuff is totally important, and it's a good way to engage in intellectual dialogue and civil discourse. But at the end of the day, what people are longing for, and oftentimes on the inside, is I just want to know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I want to know that this is not punishment,
Yeah.
that I'm not alone in this, and that there's a community and that there's a loving group of people who are there to support you in your time of need.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I think that emotional piece resonates with a lot of people. And I've experienced that firsthand with people asking me this question of why do bad things happen to good people? Because blank.
Yeah.
Right.
Something actually happened to even prompt that question in the first place.
Yeah. And so I remember the first times that I heard that question was when I was in high school. And I had one person asking in kind of a global sense of like, well, if God is real, then why would he allow something like the Holocaust to happen? Right. And then I had another friend who was like, my grandmother was a devout Christian, and she got cancer and she passed away. Why would God allow that to happen to her?
Yeah.
And like we could dive into all of the intellectual things and talk about free will, and at the time that's what I did. Right is talking about like, well, sometimes bad things happen to good people and everything that we just talked about. But if I were to go back and have that conversation now, I think having lived more life, I understand the tension in asking that question, because I want to believe that there is a good God and that he cares. And a few years ago, I was diagnosed with a chronic pain condition, and it's made my life more challenging. And it has been challenging for a while, but now that I can put a name to it, it's really shifted my life to where now it's like, okay, I need to stay on top of my health and my medication, so that I can live a relatively normal life. And I really resonate with the book of Job, because this is supposed to be the most righteous man, someone much more righteous than I am. And he goes through all of this suffering. And we get to the end of his story, and he doesn't have any explanation for why things have happened, but he has peace knowing that God is in control. And I think that's a similar season to one that I've been in, to where I'm like, God, I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? It feels like I'm cursed. Like, why is this happening to me? And yet it just is, right? There is no response. There is no answer. It just is a factor in my life. And just in recent years, I lost a close friend of mine. There was an incident where he was at work doing security, and someone came in and made a decision to take his life over a phone charger, right? And I've had to wrestle with that as well, of like, God, this is someone who believed in you, and he was doing his best to be a good person. Like, why did he have to be taken? And again, it's the same thing of like, there's no real good answer to that. Sometimes bad things just happen. And I can try to continue to sit with that and let it weigh me down. Or I can try to remember the person that he was to others and to me, and use that to try to be the best person that I can be, to try to honor who he was, right? And I think you touched on something so good of like, we often stop at the suffering of like, everything is bad and everything is terrible, and Jesus came and he died for our sins. But I think we often forget about the resurrection, right? It's two sides of the same coin. It's all supposed to be read as one narrative, one event, because it's not just that Jesus died, right? Jesus faced a lot of persecution from the people that should have been his biggest supporters, right? But he also came and he healed people. He raised people from the dead, and he forgave sins. And so to me, when I read through these passages, it's talking about a lot of the blood of the lamb and Jesus' sacrifice and the cross. These are all images that would have spoken to an ancient first century Jewish perspective, right?
Absolutely.
And these metaphors of like animal sacrifice and taking it a step further of human sacrifice would have been especially relevant to the Jewish culture and surrounding cultures. For us, that feels weird. That feels
Very distant.
strange, right? And so when we read that, there's a lot about the blood of Jesus and Jesus' sacrifice and his suffering on the cross. But I think what is maybe a more apt focus for us in our culture today is what you said, the resurrection and restoration, because that's what God is trying to do and Jesus is trying to do in all of these situations, right? The suffering doesn't end at the suffering. The death doesn't end at the death. If Jesus can die and be confirmed to be dead, right, for 3 days, and then come back to life, then that validates everything else that he did and makes all of it possible.
The suffering is written into our story because otherwise there would be no purpose for Jesus to come and suffer and experience it and then die and be resurrected. If suffering was unnecessary and it could have just been avoided, why the story at all, right? So the fact that he actually came down and acknowledged the suffering and endured it, to me, God is acknowledging that, look, suffering is going to be part of the story. I never said it wasn't going to be part of the story. I never said life was going to be easy. Somewhere we made that constitution in our own mind and then assigned blame for when things didn't go right. But that's presumptuous of us because I think suffering was always part of the story. And like you said, it's not, that's just the part one of it. The second half is then what happens after the restoration that happens after the suffering is really the main character of the story. But we're so doom and gloom that we focused only on the first half and not on what's the actual moral of the story, right? It's like watching Infinity War and not watching Endgame. And just thinking that, well, that's just how it ended. Like everybody just dies. That's it. There's no redemption at all, right?
Yeah, the suffering is not the end of the story.
Exactly.
And I think that's the point that really speaks to that emotional aspect is understanding that, like, the suffering, the pain, the death, that's not the end of the story. And I think, again, a lot of that gets lost in our views on the book of Revelation, which, because of thousands of years of evolution of culture and different ideas of hell and the afterlife, has become this imagery of fire and brimstone that really was not the point of the story. But the point was to say that Jesus is coming back and he's making everything new and restoring everything. And I think that's more than the intellectual, more than the philosophical. That's the point that really convinces me that Jesus was who he says he was. All right, and he is who he says he is, because he came, was born, came to earth, born, lived a full life, died, came back from the dead, and promised that we would have that same resurrection and restoration, and that hope really speaks to that emotional struggle for me. Because I know that my pain and my loss and the things that I've experienced in my life is not the end of the story. It's a to be continued. Right. It's the Infinity War, but then that tension of having to wait a whole year after watching it in theaters to then watch Endgame. Right. Because it's like, what do you mean we have to wait a whole year? Like, I want the part 2 right now.
Well, I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. I hope that this will be useful, a guide
Mm-hmm.
for similar conversations that people are wrestling with
Mm-hmm.
amongst themselves, amongst their friends, their
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, coworkers. So I just think that this will just help provide some guidance and some thought process into, it's not a simple topic. There is no right or wrong answer,
Yeah.
but it's really about how you travel through this journey and how
Mm-hmm.
you wrestle with that. That's the most important thing. And I think that's going to be a common theme for all the questions that you guys are going to go through in this series.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we live in a society in a time where everybody just wants to Google the answer and just tell me what it is.
Right.
But we've lost the essence of struggling through something,
Mm-hmm.
really talking through it, marinating on it, praying about it, and letting that wisdom grow inside of you slowly,
Yeah.
as opposed to just getting a beam of information and thinking you're the expert. So
Right.
hopefully this dialogue encourages people and that they can have similar, vulnerable, open dialogue with people that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
And the quintessential thing is to always do it in a humble and loving way where the giving of hope and faith is the ultimate goal,
Yeah.
not to win an argument.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sitting down and having this conversation. If you thought that this conversation was helpful, leave a like. If you have more questions, please put them down below, and we would love to talk about them more. And if you want to hear more from us here at FCC, we have another video for you right here.